It's news review time. Stay tuned to Press TV. The pro-Palestinian sentiments reaching fever pitch among American university students as protests against the Gaza genocide are in full swing on campuses.
Free, free, free Palestine! Palestine is our land! No peace, no stolen land!
It's time for us to show that yes, we want to be visible. The university should do something about what we're asking about the genocide that's happening in Gaza. They should stop investing in this genocide that our people is now suffering from.
Now, protests at Columbia University have forced authorities to cancel in-person classes. Elsewhere in the Northeast, dozens of protesters were arrested at Yale University. In Massachusetts, gates to Harvard Yard were closed to public in an attempt to head off protests. Students have also set up tents and held rallies and sit-ins at other U.S. campuses across the nation that demand that universities divest finances from manufacturers that sell weapons to Israel. All right, now from the U.S., allow me to invite a couple of guests. Daniel Shaw, academic and commentator in New York. Also in New York is Max Parry, journalist and political analyst. Welcome to the show. So, Daniel, you're an academic yourself. You teach at the university, and are you there on a campus somewhere? That's what I say in your background. Tell us what's happening on campuses across the U.S.
Greetings. First of all, I'm an ex-academic. I was fired last month for critiquing the genocide in Gaza after 18 years as a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I'm a professor of Latin American and Latinx Studies. I was fired. So this repression and retaliation is widespread, and that's why the students behind me at Columbia University have stood up. This is 1 week of the Gaza Solidarity Encampment. Hundreds of Columbia and Barnard students have already been suspended. So these students are doing everything to express their solidarity with the Palestinian people who are now up against 7 months and 76 years of genocidal colonial violence coming from Israel and their Western backers. The students are more full of hope and optimism that we can have an impact in forcing the university to divest and further isolate Israel.
I see. Okay, Max, did you just hear what Daniel said? What kind of democracy is this? Where is freedom of expression and all that? U.S. has always been boasting about.
Well, I think the contrast between what's being reported in much of the mainstream corporate media, which of course is fanatically pro-Zionist, and the reality of what's taken place on campuses like Columbia here in New York City and elsewhere couldn't be starker. There's been actually an increase in law enforcement presence on campuses ever since October 7th, but I think now that the NYPD is actually being called in to evict peaceful demonstrators as more and more students and faculty, even faculty, participate against their institution's complicity in the genocide of Palestinians, we see that the response by the political establishment from the president of Columbia herself, who gave a speech saying she stood with Israel, to Mayor Adams, who's visited the Zionist entity several times, all the way up to Biden himself, their response is getting increasingly desperate. And in doing so, they're mischaracterizing what are grassroots sit-ins as somehow anti-Semitic, which, is really, I think, an attempt on their part to create a kind of moral panic and public hysteria over a completely non-existent threat to distract from the very real and meticulously documented atrocities that Israel is committing, which have become increasingly impossible to ignore and for the media to try and conceal no matter how hard they try. As the mass graves of Palestinians I heard on your previous segment you were discussing was showing how they're being dug up on a weekly basis underneath the rubble of hospitals. They're saying, don't be outraged by that. Be outraged by, won't someone please think of the poor, coddled students at these prestigious universities who are having to hear a difference of opinion against genocide. Think of them, having to be uncomfortable with these walkouts going on campus. I mean, you even see these Hasbara trolls on X, likening them to Nazi pogroms. I mean, this would be comical if the war crimes taking place in Gaza weren't so horrific. But of course, this is something that supporters of Zionism have always tried to do, which is to conflate Zionism with Judaism and making criticism of the Israeli regime synonymous with anti-Semitism, which for a long time I think was successful in previous decades, but I think they can see now that it's not working anymore, and these universities resorting to deploying the police is really about trying to prevent this from spreading to other states and other cities and campuses in the way that social movements in previous decades, such as the movement against apartheid in South Africa, or an even better example, the free speech movement and anti-Vietnam War protests happened in the 1960s. I think that they are afraid we're approaching a historical moment where the tide is turning against Israel.
Okay, Daniel, we got 1 minute left. You could tell us why this is happening mostly among university students. I mean, there are different people, from all walks of life in the U.S. that take to the streets and they support Palestine and their cause, and they don't and hate what Israel is doing to them. But it's been mostly among university students. Is it because they are more tech savvy and use social media?
The Zionists have long said that the universities represent one of the most important showdowns and clash of ideas between the anti-Zionist global struggle and the genocidal colonial Zionists themselves. They have done everything to attack these students. Many of the students who are behind me here on the East Lawn of Columbia University in the 7th day of this anti-genocide occupation have already been suspended. Dorm rooms have been raided. We've had drones patrolling us above. So many faculty, like myself, have been fired. So Zionism is on the offensive still, but I agree with Max. More and more people are waking up. People are recognizing that this misuse and weaponization of anti-Semitism is absolutely a fallacy. Last night we had a beautiful Passover Seder dinner with hundreds and hundreds of anti-Zionist Jewish students leading it. We then had a traditional Palestinian dance class. And this is what they're afraid of. They're afraid of peace-loving people, anti-colonial people from Tehran to Ramallah to New York City and across the world. These students are not going to back down. And myself, as an alumni who studied here at Columbia University, both undergrad and graduate school, as alumni, we felt a responsibility to come back and camp out and make every contribution that we can alongside the Columbia University sanctions and divestment student organization.
Okay, good luck with that. Thank you so much, Daniel Shaw and Max Parry, both in New York. And thank you for watching this episode of the News Review on Press TV.